There are many different ways to solve quadratic equations. So when do we use the square root method? Well, if you have an equation that looks anything like the ones I have here, where the only variable term is the quadratic term, is x to the second power, you don't see a linear term, right? There's no x just on its own or with a coefficient. Then that will be your hint that using the square root method might be a useful tool when you're trying to solve this quadratic. So what you're going to do if you see a variable raised to the second power equal to a constant is we're going to get it by itself by taking the square root of both sides of the equation. So when I take the square root of x squared, I'm left with just x. When I take the square root of the constant that it's equal to, it's going to be equal to the positive or negative value of that number. So the square root of 144 is 12, which means that x can either be positive 12 or negative 12. So we can write it out separately like this, so you can very clearly see the two different solutions, or we can just consolidate them right here and write down x equals positive or negative 12. Both ways of writing that answer would be correct. So those are your two solutions for that quadratic. All right, looking down in the lower left, the green problem. 3x squared equals 27. So I'm going to use the same method, but right now the x squared is not isolated yet. So I have to make sure that it's isolated first. There's nothing else around it. Right now it's being multiplied by 3. So what we're going to do is divide by 3. We're going to do the inverse operation on both sides, because when I do that, I get 1x squared, or just x squared. On the right side, I'm going to get 9. And now my green equation looks similar to my orange one, where I have a quadratic term equaling a constant. And so like we said before, to isolate that x, we're going to take the square root of both sides. And when we take the square root of that variable term, we're going to get the positive or negative square root of the constant that's on the other side. So in this equation, the solutions are 3 and -3. And again, you can write it out like this if you like, or just a little more compactly with the plus minus symbol. All right, last one. Again, I just have that x squared term. I don't see an x, so I'm thinking I could solve it with square roots, but I need to first isolate that quadratic term. So right now it's being subtracted by 10, so we're going to go ahead and do the inverse, which is to add by 10. Of course, I'm doing it on both sides of the equation. I'm going to bring down that x squared. These will cancel out, and this will equal 36. Now here I go again with a variable term raised to the second power equaling a constant. So just like the other equations, when we get to that point, we're going to take the square root of both sides. The square root of x squared is x, and then we're going to take the positive and negative value of the square root of the constant on the other side. So x is equal to positive or -6 for this problem. All right, I'm going to leave you with a couple of practice problems to try on your own, and I'll put the answers to these practice problems in the description of the video. So if you get it right, give it a thumbs up. If you get it wrong, you can't find your mistake, you can leave me a comment with an explanation of your work, and I will try to help you find your mistake. So that is how you solve quadratic equations by using the square root method.